Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well this February morning, and thank you for joining our webinar today. This session is primarily aimed at asset owners, where we'll be covering the emphasis on digitisation requirements within the Building Safety Act and breaking down the fragmented data silos seen across many organisations today, and look at how these can be streamlined to drive efficiencies, data consistency and compliance. My name's Mira Hudson, CMO at Zootech, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'll be talking about the digital state of play and sharing some results from a survey we conducted with asset owners to understand how far they had come with digital transformation to support Building Safety Act compliance. I'm very pleased to be joined by Alistair Weston, Health and Safety Director at Student Roost, who will talk about his experience with managing building information and data for Building Safety Act compliance across multiple student properties, including high-rise buildings, and the work they have done with Zootech to digitise and bring all their buildings and information into one place. Thank you for joining us today, Alistair. And last but not least, we're joined by James Stallman, Zootech's Account Management Head, who will talk through our approach to supporting customers with digitising and managing vast amounts of data for better building information management, from digital handover through to document management to ensure a reliable audit trail throughout the building life cycle. James will also share a demo of some of our solutions so you can see these in action. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the session, and we will try and answer these as we go. We'll also take questions at the end. You can add your questions on the Q&A button at the bottom of the right-hand screen, so you should be able to all see that. You can also use the chat box as well. There will be a poll throughout the session, so please share your insight with us during the session, as it's always good to have feedback and see where our companies are in their play of digitisation. Again, the poll button is at the bottom of the screen, and we will share the poll when we're ready and go through the question and the answers. So let's get started and into the crux of today, digital state of play. So where are we today in terms of digitisation? So compared to other industries such as the financial and probably manufacturing sectors, we have as an industry probably always been slower to embrace the benefits of digital. Construction itself is one of the most laggard probably adopters of technology globally, although this has been fast-tracked probably over more recent years. And I think this kind of slowness to embrace that digitisation piece has probably cascaded across the wider residential and building management sectors, with paper-based processes still somewhat in play today. So what has been the resistance? I think for industries that have been around for hundreds of years, such as construction, there has always been probably a reluctance to change when things aren't broken. Things have always worked for a long time, so why change it? Also, with construction and kind of building maintenance management, it's largely a manual job, so digital has never probably played a huge factor until now. Also, when there are other demands and factors in play, such as regulatory changes, which put huge pressures on businesses, volatility in market, skills and labour shortages, changes to cost structures as examples, digital can sometimes take a back seat. However, in 2017, we obviously experienced the Grenfell Tower and that disaster and the subsequent Hackett review, and that exposed many safety failures for high-rise buildings, but also exposed the lack of building information and safety data that was out there, but also accessible by the right people to make quick, informed decisions. As part of the Building Safety Act coming into force, digital information was a key part of that, and having that digital information not only available, accessible, and updatable, but also available to the right people at the right time so those decisions could be made, and information on the safety practices was all together. And as part of that, the golden thread of information is part of that compliance. So a digital first approach has very much been the state of play in the last, I would say, 5-10 years. So where are we now? Obviously, digitisation is a key part of a business, and we'd quite like to understand, as part of our first poll, where you guys are in your digital transformation. We have 4 options as part of this question. So how do you feel in terms of advancing across asset management, and how far are you along in your digital journey? First, Questions: planning, are you at the start, assessing your roadmap, the start of the journey in terms of putting solutions in place, progressing, or well in advance in your solution rollout? And that poll is in play now. Hopefully you can all see it, and it'd be great if you could provide your answers. I can see your answers coming in. So 56% of you are at the start of your digital journey. So just looking at solutions and third-party platforms that you can use to support your progress. Some of you are progressing, but very few kind of in the advanced stage and a few in the planning stage. So that's quite interesting and in line with some of the results that we've seen with our survey. So, as mentioned at the beginning, we did a quick snapshot survey across asset owners in the UK to really look at the state of play and how they were progressing with that digital transformation and adopting technology to meet regulatory compliance. While 87% reported they were some way into their digital journey, 47%, so that's almost half, were just at the start or planning stage, which was quite surprising, really, given the regulatory emphasis on digitisation. Additionally, 85% highlighted challenges meeting Digital Building Safety Act compliance requirements, and this is likely exacerbated by unclear guidelines and clear view on what's required, and also the fact that data is quite fragmented across many organisations still. To add to this, and given the requirements for the golden thread of information under the BSA, 70% said that it still had challenges managing data today, particularly across disparate systems and formats, which is making it hard to achieve that golden thread. And some of you on the call today may be experiencing that too. I think it's quite hard if you've got multiple systems and multiple ways of storing information to make sure that it is accessible and in one place. And we saw that from the respondents that we surveyed earlier in the year. In turn, this is causing issues locating asset information, with over half of our respondents saying that it was a significant pain point, and it really kind of defeats the object of having a digitized data set if it's not easily accessible. On top of that, 56% said they struggle to share and update it. Again, another key requirement of the golden thread and BSA compliance. Finally, only 27% of the survey respondents that we had across asset owners stated that asset information is properly digitized and managed within the organisation to ensure compliance within the Building Safety Act, which is a fairly low number when you take into consideration that Building Safety Act has been in play for more than a year now. Given these results and where we are, we feel there is still a lot that we can do and still a lot to bring true digitisation across the industry and provide an environment where digital information can be managed more effectively across businesses. So this is actually quite a good segue into talking a bit more about what has been done and what you can do. So I'll hand over to James in a minute to talk about, some of the best practices and approach that we look at. But first of all, we have our second poll, and that is, in your opinion, is your asset information properly digitised and managed to comply with Building Safety Act? Quite simple answers here. So yes, somewhat, no, or I don't know. So if you can bring up your poll, and if you're happy to answer. So again, I can see some of you are answering, 40% saying somewhat, that they have digitisation in place to manage and comply with building safety. Some no's in there as well still, and I don't knows. So again, a bit of a mixed variation, which is probably quite a telling sign of where we are as an industry in terms of that digital transformation and the process that we're making. Probably still a lot more that we can do. So on that note, I'll hand over to you, James, and you can talk a little bit more about some of the things that we're supporting our customers with. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Maria. So the way that we think about the building life cycle in ZooTech aligns with what we call solution families. And I think that the key thing we look to achieve with this is really representing that journey through the building life cycle, and doing sort of a range of solutions that are going to kind of meet the needs of our customers across those. So it starts probably before the kind of key consideration and the focus of what this webinar is. So thinking about document management and quality management during the construction process. So you can see the left two items on the slide in front of you. So we obviously won't go into those in heaps of detail. Where it becomes particularly relevant for asset management is once we move into handover management, then eventually asset management. I'll speak in more detail on these later in this session today, but just to give a brief overview, digital handover, as I'm sure most of you are aware, is the process whereby all of the key information, O&M manuals, etc., asset registers and the like are collated during the build process. That all has to be documented and then handed over to the asset owner at the point of practical completion. So we have a number of services and solutions that fit around that, and this is very much our kind of legacy and our bread and butter. So when the business first started doing this, it was very much an undigitized process. So hard copies were the norm. I'm sure most people are familiar with this. We've seen the change over time. The migration from these hard copies to being electronic copies, so delivered via USBs and being able to be handed over, and obviously that reduces the just the sheer volume of documentation in a very physical format that goes over. As we progress further and as we enter 2025 and even before that, the format by which that information is handed over becomes modernized again. So we're looking at cloud-based solutions and the ability to provide access to this key information at the point of handover to effectively unlimited users, no matter where they are, without having to worry about where the physical copies are located. As we move into asset management, we think about a number of solutions that we have that are able to support our customers here across the concepts of building document management. So once you have all of this key building information, how are you actually going to access it? How are you going to share it within your organization or with subcontractors when required for PPM and the like? And how do you make sure that is accessible and kept up to date? We've started to look at other areas that are facilitated by this information. So we view it very much as the building block that sits under a range of other solutions we can provide. And as the regulatory environment changes and adapts over time, things like high risk building compliance, cladding remediation, fire door audits become particularly or even more kind of front of mind for our customers. And as I said, that's due to a combination of changes in the regulatory environment, but also just general kind of modernization of how we think about building management as time goes on. So this is how we think about our kind of ecosystem, if you will. Specifically drilling into what our approach is for asset owners. So I think, again, we think about this quite chronologically, and I think it helps set out the journey that a customer will go on with us. So it starts with having effectively a specified provider for handover. So we obviously do this. We know that there's a wide range of vendors that do it as well. But the idea is that as an asset owner, you are able to then ensure that you're receiving a consistent set of documentation. So the structure is going to be the same. The content of the documents is going to be set out in the same way. Means that you're able to compare and move from building to building without having to relearn a whole new folder structure or anything along those lines. You can be confident that the breadth of documentation you're going to receive at practical completion is consistent. So that's step one. As we move into step two, on completion, so all of the information is then provided within ZooTech. So as I say, we'll come on to a demo and the like a little bit later on in this presentation, but the idea being very much that cloud-based system. It allows for multiple access points. Doesn't matter whether you're on site or whether you're at home or whether you've been meeting somewhere else, you're able to access the information. And so that's kind of the point at which that chronology progresses. So once the building is in the operation and maintenance stage, that then becomes your record of all of the key building information that has been collated during the build process. As we move on to this, how our customers typically kind of grow from that point. So normally they'll specify a provider. Ourselves will then hand the information over. They're able to access it in ZooTech. we don't need to be specified at the beginning of the journey, right? So we're able to bring existing building information into the platform. So you can see, you can either add new buildings in development, which is where we'd be specified to collate the O&M information on behalf of the contractor, or in use buildings, so buildings that are live, as it were, can have their documentation kind of retroactively migrated into our system, and again, using the same structures and formats. And I think this is the buzzword, maybe not the most exciting one, but the idea of consistency across formats and across how information is structured is really important, because it means that this breadth of documentation, a typical building we see has kind of 2,000 to 3,000 documents associated with it. It's a large amount of information, and if you need to drill down to a specific single PDF, for example, you want to be able to do so in a way which is going to be the same across all the buildings in the portfolio, and you want to be able to do so quickly and easily. And then, as I spoke about previously on the last slide, that you can then layer in those additional solutions which are going to support the maintenance of the building over time. We've recently done some kind of internal market analysis, as it were. So looking at some of the segments where we kind of play most strongly in, particularly in the residential space, we had some data where we were able to look at the total number of high-rise building units across the country for each of these, and then compared that to how many that we have. And so if we're looking at build to rents, for example, obviously a very fast growing space in the resi market, there's approximately 100,000 HRB build to rent units, and we have about a kind of 30% market share of those. So I think because this is a fast growing space, the concept of digitization is probably a little more embedded from the outset there. And so as a result, the idea of bringing a kind of compatible solution in from the beginning is more likely to happen. And that's absolutely what we've seen. As we move into the likes of purpose-built student accommodations and housing associations, we're kind of between 5 and 10% in terms of the number of UK high-rise buildings or high-risk buildings that we have within the ZooTech system. So I think, firstly, we're seeing that number grow over time. I think secondly, what we're able to do is have a real broad slice of the overall market, and that feeds into how we develop our solutions and adapt them over time to make sure that what we're doing is very much aligned with the needs and requirements of customers. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Alistair now, who's going to talk us through the case study of how Student Roost have been managing their digitisation progress over time.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me all okay. Good morning. Apologies that my camera's not working. Some issues with IT, so you'll just have to put up with my initials. Just to cover a little bit about who I am, I'm Alistair Weston, Director of Health and Safety at Student Roost. I've worked in the purpose-built student accommodation sector now for over 20 years, working with different providers, and now at Student Roost. So we are a provider based out of Birmingham. We were recently acquired in 2022 by Greystar, and just you can look at some of the images here. These are sort of the typical examples of some of the buildings that we have. So we have 60 buildings across the UK, 20,000 plus residents in over 22 cities. So all parts of the UK covered. And these buildings will be typically things such as studios, cluster flats where you'll have a kitchen and 4 or 5 rooms, maybe up to 10 on there. And they'll have a wide range of facilities. So you can see things such as cinema rooms, gymnasiums, and things such as that. With that, there comes quite a broad range of data that comes with that. So all of those things have internal and external PPM that go with it. And all of that is information that we collate, whether that be internal or external. We do have a small co-living element as well. So we have got a site in the Southwest, which does not just students, but that also covers young professionals as well. And the sites vary. So some of these sites are very, very small. Some of them are, we've got one in Nottingham, which is over 1,000 beds. We've got some sites which are as little as 50 beds. So it's a real diverse range of sites. The services we provide, that then brings a lot of information, which obviously warrants a system such as what we're talking about today. So the services we provide will range from things such as all the way through from the build of the building at the beginning, the development of it, the selling of the room, the upkeep of the room, whether that be housekeeping, whether that be maintenance. We are a 24/7, 365 operation. So that brings, and students brings incidents, welfare responses, things like that, as I'm sure you can well imagine. And all of that has a lot of asset and capital data. So working with Greystar, we do significant amount of capital projects. So things like refurbishments, ongoing maintenance, reactive maintenance, and all of this information is collated. So whether that be in a high-rise building or a non-high-rise building, all of that is held by us as a business. So our challenge, so obviously with the Building Safety Act coming in and the requirement that we needed to have a golden thread of information, we started to look at exactly what we had. And I'm sure like many of you, we had it in a plethora of systems. So some of it would have been files on a shelf. Some of it would be held in somebody's room. Some of it was held on desktops. Some of it was held on SharePoint. Some of it was held on internal drives. So our beginning challenge was that we had a whole range of different things. Of where the information is being held. So as a business, we've got over 30 high-rise sites that come under the Building Safety Act, and you can see one of them photoed there, which is about 22 stories high. And so we had to ensure that we had a golden thread for all of these premises. All of them had a differing set. So the way that Student Roost grew, which added to the problem that we needed the solution for, was that not all of it was developed by us. A lot of it was acquisition. So a lot of it was acquisitions from competitors. And as a result, there's a mixture of the quality of the data that we would have had and the way that it would have been handed across to us. So as a result, we had it in a totally different way and no consistent way that we could manage our golden thread. The quality was very, very different, and that made it very, very difficult. Historically, we'd always done this on internal drives and SharePoint. And that in itself brought different challenges because everything was saved in different ways or managed by people individually differently within the business. And the other challenge we have is a lot of our PPM is done internally and a lot of the PPM is done externally. So it is around trying to collate different things from different sources at different times, and it was proving very, very difficult. So our live data and capital works were inconsistent held. I think, as I said, SharePoint was probably the way that we were doing a lot of it. Unreliable. People could go in there potentially and delete stuff and it would be lost forever, and then we would be stumped. So the key building information was often missed or potentially lost, and as a result we needed to find a solution of how we would solve that problem for us. So then in 2023, as we started to really get our teeth into the joys of the Building Safety Act and everything that brings, we started to really develop our work on the sort of the golden thread of information, and that's when we partnered with Zootech. This has made it seamless. So if I look from the start, how we first of all collated all the information on SharePoint, which was the tough, I guess, the manual bit of getting all that information into one place. We were able to put that into a folder structure that I think was suitable for Zootech, that we could then move that across those documentations in one swoop or in a phased way of risk so that they could all go onto one system. This has allowed us to have a consistent way of holding all of our information. We've actually found that since doing this, we've actually found some information that we never knew we had. Because of the way that the system's broken it down for us, we've actually been able to go onto it and find, I never realized we had some of this stuff. When you imagine we have a system where you have several thousand documents, to be able to actually go into one individually is very, very difficult. So we've actually found that this system has allowed us to find stuff that we never knew existed. It's also allowed us to have some proper gap analysis. So we've now been able to look at it and say, right, well, we know this is where we need to get more information. This is where we've got gaps that we can't resolve. And this has allowed us to then forecast for budgets in the future to say, this is works that we need to now go out and actually go out and acquire services, or go out and acquire some support, or go out and acquire some paperwork or some surveys or whatever it might be. So that's allowed us to really help that, and that's allowed us to work on those gap analysis with the Building Safety Act and the building safety cases that we've been working on. As I'm sure some of you are already doing, we've already started to submit some of our building safety case applications, and again, the system has allowed us to do that. So going in there has made it easier to find a lot of the structural information, a lot of the structural surveys, a lot of the structural drawings, all of that information that would have been very, very difficult for us to get electronically to hand across to the author of the building safety case is been a lot easier to do now, which would have been impossible without the system. We've also used it on things that are away from the Building Safety Act. So, as some of you may know, recent changes in man-safe requirements has meant that we've had to go back and find some information on some of those systems. So once again, these were things that we never knew we had. These were buried, not always filed correctly in O&Ms or digital ones that we had or paper-based that we couldn't seamlessly get hold of. We've been able to get those, take those, and then offer those, send those through to our partners that are doing maintenance and PPM on there. So again, whilst we preliminary use this and thought this would be amazing for the Building Safety Act, our golden thread compliance and producing the building safety cases, is actually found that we've been using it for a multitude of different things now. And if I think about sort of the future, I guess the future is the here and now as well as the future. So, you know, we've got 30 30 high-rise buildings, and we are a small percentage through that. So we know that there's going to be more requirements than that. So we know that that's going to be with us to stay. We do, as I said at the beginning, we do have properties across the UK, and a lot of those are also low-rise buildings, and a lot of those are in Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. So we are very conscious that the legislation may well change, and that as a result, a HRB definition may change, or the Building Safety Act or variations of it may move to other parts of the UK. And as a result, we need to be ready for that. What we don't want to be doing is being caught on the hop and then finding that we've got to go backtrack again. So what we are doing as a business is essentially treating every single building as a high-rise building. And again, the system has allowed us to do that so that we can collate all our information in a consistent way. So we've got all the structural information, not going necessarily as far as doing a building safety case unless we absolutely have to for a building. But it's allowed us to strategically look at all the information we've got, ensure that we hold it consistently, and apply the same approach to every high-rise building that we do to every high-rise building, to every low-rise building, or to whichever part of the UK that happens to be based in. It's allowed us to bring that consistency. We've also been allowed us to share a lot of this information with our fire assessors, our water assessors, our building safety case authors, and we've just started on that journey. So, you know, there will be some more people that we'll be looking to share that with, but it's allowed us to link in our PPM and our capital works projects in a seamless way. And as sort of linked to that, one of the other aspirations of us as a business is that we are looking to get ISO 45001 accreditation in the future. Obviously, with that, for those of you who've done it, it does bring a lot of requirement to be consistent. It does bring a lot of documentation requirements, and we feel that having this system, Zootech, will allow us to help on that roadmap. I think if we'd have gone down that roadmap with the SharePoint solution and folders in people's houses and garages and shelves and desktops, I think it would have been a red flag. But having this, we can actually say, look, here's all our information, all shared on there, PPM, sort of from cradle to grave of a building, I think is absolutely been essential for us and a huge, huge asset and assistance. And that's me. So.
Thank you, Alistair. I do have a question in actually, which I hoped you could answer off the back of that. Obviously, you've been managing, multiple buildings across the country. How do you go about or could you dig into a bit deeper into how you manage something at that scale? If you're able to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, we set out what we thought was a minimum requirement of information that we needed. So we looked at guidance, certainly around the Building Safety Act sites or the HRB. So we looked at a minimum set of requirements of what we felt we needed to have, and then looked at the sort of the folder structure that yourselves had, looked at how we could then mirror that as best as possible using a SharePoint system. And then obviously once you've done the manual process of getting as many folders together as possible, scanning as much as possible together, which obviously you have to get some support to do because that couldn't be done internally, we then managed to get it in as much as a way that we felt would be easy for yourself to digest and then move that across, which I think, we had regular meetings with sort of James and others, that we said, does this meet your requirements? And I think generally the feedback was that it certainly helped Zootech to then say, right, we can easily take this information and move it across. So it's no mean feat, the beginning bit, getting all the scanned information. And obviously the sooner anybody can start that, the better, is the advice I would give to people. If you haven't started it already, then I would start it very, very soon, because that's the sort of the manual piece of it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alistair. So we're now coming up to looking at kind of best practices for asset owners. So I'll hand back to you, James, to take that over. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks, Alistair. I think it's really interesting what you said at the end around kind of thinking forward around how you're treating effectively all buildings as HRBs, because this regulation almost acts as a bit of a forcing function to look at the quality of information that exists across the buildings. And I think it's almost the ability to then get ahead of where there is likely to be further regulatory change, right? Like, as you say, the definition of an HRB may change over time. There's already slightly nuanced differences between kind of an 18 metre plus and an 11 metre plus, and they may well be brought into parity. So I think anything that you can do as an asset owner that's going to bring you to the point where you're confident that there's consistency across the board is always going to be valuable. So going to go a little bit further into some of the points that were raised earlier. So looking at why digitization matters. So I think there's a number of themes that I touched on, just to delve in a bit more detail here. So starting with structure and standardization, not particularly sexy topics, but really fundamental to how we think about the digitization and management of key building information. If you are confident that across a portfolio of buildings that you manage, that you own, that all of the information is going to be available in a consistent format, structured in a consistent set of file structures, then you know that you're going to be able to find what you need, or you're going to be able to identify those gaps, and that facilitates then the complete data visibility across assets. So you can jump into any asset at any time and delve into the files, the documents that you require to satisfy any number of tasks, be they regulatory or maintenance focused. It also gives you more control over that kind of building information. So where you can see that there are potentially gaps, or where you know that there are updates coming to building information, be it capital works, as Alistair said, be it anything along the lines of kind of, refurbs, fit outs, etc., that need to take place and are going to generate further documentation. You have the control and the ability to then update the system and be able to continue to make sure that it represents a live record of the building's key information, rather than it being, there's a box of files here, there's a USB there. What you have is one kind of central resource that anybody associated with the building can make use of. And it's been mentioned a bunch of times, but obviously all of this is done with the view of facilitating, enabling compliance with regulation and a changing regulatory environment as well. I think, we don't pretend to offer a kind of magic click a button and it's going to write your safety case for you. That a safety case is going to change over time, what's required for it. Obviously, they're only really just going out now at the moment, and kind of comments and feedback are coming through and have been for the last few months. But what we provide is the means to organize and standardize the information that feeds into things like safety cases and the like. And so what we try and do is provide that kind of broad basis that's going to allow you and enable you to have at least a slightly less painful kind of approach to building safety cases and the like. So without kind of repeating myself too much, but looking onto the right side, so that you want to be able to understand the data, the documentation that you have, where you have gaps, what you need. You want to be able to maintain accurate data, and then prove things like critical inspections checks have been undertaken. There's the facility for audit trails, etc., so you can see who has been responsible for carrying certain things out. You have that legacy of various work that's been undertaken and the documentation associated with it. And it's about creating that evidence basis that you need to prove compliance. So, this is all aligned as probably most of you kind of have established. It's aligned with this concept of the golden thread, something of a potentially nebulous concept in some ways. I think the definition of it has potentially changed over time, but at its core, what it is that thread of information from build through to operation and maintenance, right? And anything that allows to kind of join those two processes up is going to be of benefit to asset owners, so that they can kind of demonstrate everything that has happened and everything that needs to be documented from the initial build through to the point at which it is maintained once the building is in use. So touched on before this idea of specifying a digital handover solution. So I think particularly where we've worked with customers who have a blend of documentation that's been accumulated over the years through a number of providers. Maybe a contractor's collated the O&Ms themselves, maybe they've used a range of third-party providers. where we think that the value in specifying a kind of single third party or single vendor to do this is that it's going to help you overcome any quality issues or mismatches between the various sets of documentation. So everything is consistent, complete. And you can be confident that that is applicable across all buildings where you have a specified digital handover solution. It also reduces the likelihood of missing information. So we've been doing this for kind of 20 years. The templates and the documentation that we look at and that we expect to receive on any building it's largely consistent, right? There's always going to be some variation, but we know what we're looking for, and we want to ensure that our customers are confident that they are getting the full package of required information. So we will work with them to identify where there are potentially data gaps, and highlight any areas of concern or whether the documentation is required. And we keep coming back to the theme of compliance, but it obviously is an important one, particularly in the current environment. But all of the documentation which is collated during the build process is absolutely integral to those safety cases and to helping you meet compliance. So the absence of information is getting to the point where it's kind of not good enough, right, in this environment, and you want to be confident that you're collecting it at the time that the work associated with it is happening, rather than having to try and retroactively go back and find information that maybe wasn't even kind of generated at the time, which is obviously not a position anybody wants to find themselves in. So this is why we think it's really valuable as an asset owner actually being really involved at the beginning of this journey of collating the information, because ultimately you're the customer of the contractor at the end of the day, and although their obligation to you is to provide the digital handover information, you are going to increasingly want some oversight as to what that information looks like and the breadth and quality of it. So as we go into kind of the other various bits that we would say help us achieve or help you achieve a golden thread of information, some of these we'll jump into in demo pretty shortly, but we layered on. I mean, it's one thing having this kind of you've got all of this information, but I guess the question is always going to be, well, what's the difference between using a solution like Zootech versus having it in a SharePoint? And hopefully when we look at the demo of the platform, that'll be pretty self-evident, but kind of looking at this, some of the things that we kind of apply across our projects. So we have dashboards that are kind of geared towards providing the information that is likely to be required for safety cases. So we'll go into that into a bit of detail, but the idea being that it's not just, all of your documents are here, they're somewhere, go and find them. The idea is the documents that are particularly salient to a safety case can be tracked down pretty quickly and easily, and any gaps can be spotted. Gaps obviously being the next point, so proactively fixing missing documentation. So there's inbuilt gap analysis into the dashboards that we provide, so you can see where there are missing pieces of information. You can drill down. Where we've been working as a digital handover provider, we can also get that down to the level where it may be, this level of documentation was expected from this provider, so from this subcontractor, for example, meaning that it's easier for asset owners to then go back and kind of track it down if it's particularly necessary. It's all well and good the information being in our system, but you want to be able to easily export it. So again, when we get into the demo, we'll show quickly, but the idea being that you can actually very simply get to the document in question and then download it, so that if you need to provide it as source of supporting information for a safety case, you can do so without too much hassle. Then we kind of looked at standardization. I feel like I might have said that too many times. Standardization, consistency across this presentation. It's the kind of fundamental part, as we said, but the idea is obviously very key. And then kind of looking as you move into the idea of ongoing maintenance of a building, so the automation of tasks, thinking about things like PPM. What's the information that anybody on the ground doing inspections is going to require on a consistent basis? You want to be able to get that to hand pretty easily and consistently if it's going to be used on a weekly, quarterly, however frequent basis. So that's obviously integral to the actual operation of the building. So it's not just this idea of a static repository that you can draw upon when you need. Obviously that's a part of it, but it's also how does the information that's being collated support effectively the roles of people who are managing the asset. And dashboards we've touched on, I won't dwell on that any further. And then kind of looking at another area that we're going to jump into as part of the demo. So how do we make use of the information that's there and start to kind of double down on the functionality that's there in the ZooTech platform. So fire door audits is something that we're working with a number of customers on. So this is obviously requirements, typically kind of quarterly audits of fire doors, inspections, going around to ensuring that all of the fire doors are operating correctly, that there are any issues are flagged and remediated, or alternatively that if there is a requirement for a replacement, you have the information there so that you can support a business case for replacement of kind of fire doors or even kind of servicing of them. So we'll look into this, but the idea is that we've kind of used our expertise in the quality management piece. So earlier in that construction journey, a lot of the work that we do is around quality inspections, be that QA, be it health and safety, be it even kind of Part L compliance, for example. So we're able to leverage the power in the platform and bring that to the asset management space. And I'll kind of bring this to life, hopefully, a little bit once we get into the demo. But the idea being that there's actually a tool you can put in the hands of people walking around the building, carrying out the inspections, that they can provide things like photographic evidence. You have a kind of audit trail where there'll be things like digital signatures in place, so you know who's been responsible for carrying them out, and you can set up notifications, etc. So when there are issues that need remediating, you can do so, and it can all be managed through a single digital platform. Okay, so that brings us onto the demo. This is where I hope that all of my setup for the various tech bits has worked and hasn't fallen apart. So bear with me while I quickly move into screen share. That appears to have worked. Okay, so we're going to start off just in terms of how we look at building document management. So this is one of the dashboards that we have that is a little more geared towards giving an overview of BSA information in combination with the totality of building information. So when you jump in, you get presented with this nice dashboard which gives you an overall document summary. So looking at this example, the idea of this example is that it's a building where there has been a range of existing information. We have worked with a customer, so similar to the Student Roost example, we've worked with a customer, they've collated the information that's been provided to us, we've processed it, ordered it, put it in a fixed structure. What we also provide is what we expect to see for a building of that nature as well. So that allows us to give those deltas. So when we're looking at this, the idea of this kind of final, so that's where the document's there and it exists. There's information here still being processed, for example. So it's either been received, not yet added on, or it's been returned because it doesn't meet kind of quality standards. And then expected is where it kind of does what it says on the tin, right? We expect to see a document in this area, but we haven't yet received anything. So this really allows you to start getting that understanding of the picture of the building information you have. Is it sufficient? Does it provide everything that I need, or do I actually have gaps that I need to drill into? So this is kind of the high-level dashboard view. It's all broken down into the various packages of work, so be that health and safety, fabric services, building information, kind of certs, etc. You can drill into here, and it gives you that kind of progress across the various packages that you can jump into. You can drill into all of this as you would expect. I mean, it's a kind of Power BI dashboard, so pretty easy to kind of jump into the various bits. But as we are somewhat light on time, I'm not going to get into the absolute kind of granular detail of it. One of the key things, one of the most important things that our customers kind of say to us when they start working with us is it's just that navigability or ability to find documentation, which is the thing they're trying to solve for, where it is on SharePoint, where it is stored on a USB in somebody's drawer, and then you need to ask them to unlock it so you can look at the information. That's the main barrier, and it's a real kind of a drain on efficiency as well. So within the dashboard, we have what is a really easy to use mechanism to just quickly search and drill down to exactly what you want. So if, for example, I wanted to find some manufacturer's literature relating to the lighting associated with this building, it's just a simple case of typing in lighting here on my search, returns a load of documents. I can then apply some filters over the top. I want my manufacturer's literature, and then I've got two records here. So say I want the second one, this Collingwood lighting. I am, in a matter of seconds in the document, right? So this is what we're trying to kind of demonstrate in terms of the ease of use and the accessibility of the platform. It is no longer having to trawl through a file structure, right? You can do a combination of keyword search and filtering, and it will almost immediately get you to the information that you're looking for, assuming that it's there, of course. so that is kind of the one on there. And then lastly, for this dashboard as well, so let me just grab my filters quickly. Oh, wrong one, sorry. So this is where, when we're thinking about things like the kind of documents required to get you that full picture that's going to support things like a safety case, we have this kind of progress breakdown here. So again, broken down by the various packages. This is really just a kind of drill down option here. So I wanted to look into what I have here. So like gateway documentation, if I'm thinking kind of, gateways 1 through 3, this might have been set up in alignment with that. And I can jump down here into all of these. Obviously, only 12% progress or 12% of documents received in this area versus what's been expected. I can drill down and get really quickly into subcategories, so I get a very clear understanding of where I'm missing documentation. So if I look at my fire risk assessment, for example, what am I missing here? Okay, I don't have a concept design. I've got my construction phase, my finals, and I've got my risk assessment document, but I am missing documentation. So thinking back to that idea of where do we have gaps in information, what we're looking to facilitate here is being able to identify those quickly so that you can remediate them, or alternatively, and in some instances, you look at them and you go, okay, there's a gap here, but actually I know that's not too much of an issue, right? Like if I'm looking at kind of, I don't know, integrated fire systems across an entire building, but actually it's not relevant for one block versus another one, or there's a change in literature and it's all collated in a single place. At least I know that although it looks like there's a gap here, I know that the documentation does exist. It's in another format. It's a collated set of volumes, which applies across all of them. What we're trying to do, though, is support that kind of clarity and understanding of information that you have, and give you visibility into where, even if there are kind of gaps, whether that is going to be an issue for you or not. So that is the kind of BSA and the standard almost document management overview. I appreciate the pace is a little rapid on this just because I've got another area to go through. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to kind of drop them in. We'll address them at the end of this. What I'm quickly going to do is jump into an overview now of the fire door audits. So similarly, when you're interacting with this in cloud, what we term our desktop-based application, you get a nice set of kind of dashboards to give you an overview of what's happening. So looking at kind of a quarterly set of inspection schedules on fire doors, this is what it's going to look like. So it's going to return to you where they've been complete, where they're pending. I'm not going to go through all of the tabs on here because it's a little bit more interesting to jump into the kind of device-based demo. The other thing just to call out, though, is you get a really simple wall chart view as well. So if you want to look at all of the kind of fire doors, these are all the individual fire door codes that are here. You can see when they've been completed, where there's gaps in inspections. I guess the assumption is this runs up to Q4, hence it being a little bit light here. Which is obviously really powerful because you can very quickly jump into each of those individual fire doors and look at the inspection history and see where there's any gaps. The other thing that we do when working on this fire doors is we work with our customers to provide a lot of meta information associated with this, because I don't know about you, but when I look at CDL and a string of numbers, it doesn't mean a huge amount to me. But what I can quickly do is, for example, in the door types, look at all of my, say, single glass doors, and then that will filter down. So I can start getting a bit more of an overview, looking at the types of fire doors, for example, that I have on an asset, and start drilling down into those rather than just having that total kind of gamut of all of them. What I'm going to do now, all being well, is stop sharing here and share another screen. So I mentioned before that a lot of this is based, or this functionality within fire doors is based on our kind of expertise in working in quality management. So this is the Zootech application, which is just running on my iPhone. And within this, I'm going to very quickly show you how I can basically log an inspection. So I jump into my fire door audits here. This is still the register of all of the various audits that have been undertaken. Now, as we mentioned before, there's likely to be a little bit of a challenge in just trying to work out what the fire door is based on nothing but a code. So what I can also do is I can use my QR scanner. That was so quick you may not have seen it, but effectively if you've got QR codes on the various doors, you can just walk up with your application, point the camera at it, and it's now going to drill this straight down into everything associated with this specific door. So I jump in here, I can see all of the previous inspections that have been carried out and the photos that have been associated with them. If I open up a new inspection, again, if I want to put the door ID in, I can just use the QR code, he said confidently. There we go. So that will start to fill that out. It's not pre-populating anything else, but we can set all of that to do so. But the idea being is that it's as simple as possible for somebody in the building to go around and carry out the various information. I then just have a number of set questions. So this is our default question set associated with them, built up from our experience and work with the customers we have who are using this solution, but that's not to say it's kind of set in stone, so we can absolutely work on these. So we look at everything across ironmongery, doors and frames, etc., glazing, and it's just a very simple process, right? Just kind of go through and click whether it's yes or no, and then if photographic evidence is required, let me find a door, you can jump in and, very zoomed in, take a photo of the door. Now, I might have slightly delayed that, bear with me. So what I can also do, you've got half my desk as well, but within this, I can also mark it up. So there's an issue of a hinge, for example, I can quickly do that, and then that is done. So once you've gone through and done all of this, I've now got an attached file. Let's assume I answered all of my questions. I can then push this through for signature. So there's a sign-off process that you need to follow. I can quickly go through here and then add a digital signature. You can have this locked by PIN as well for security purposes. So enter all of that information, click done, and it gets sent. We can build notification steps off the back of that. So if there is somebody who needs to approve these inspections, then they can do so, and they can do it all digitally through the platform. This will then create a record on the kind of Zootech Cloud application, and so it will then just be visible within the dashboard, the wall chart, everything that I showed you before. So it's an instant pass-through of information from the person carrying out the inspection on site. As soon as they save and sync their record, then it's available for review, sign off. If there's any remediation works that need to be carried out, then that can be entered into as a task and carried out, and once completed, marked off within the app as well. So we're just trying to demonstrate an end-to-end process here, which is hopefully very simple to use. That kind of concludes everything that I was looking to run through. So I'll just stop my sharing. We have a few minutes left. Maria, not sure there's anything else you wanted to add other than if there's any questions, then we'll jump into them.
There was a question actually quickly, James,
Sure.
and do we integrate with BIM? Maybe we can talk about integrations a bit.
Yeah, so for handover delivery, yes, we have some customers who use kind of BIM for that. There is a BIM viewer within the platform, which you can use on the desktop version. We find the majority of our customers don't use BIM delivery. I think a lot of them aren't necessarily, effectively kind of mature in that journey enough where that becomes a kind of consistent requirement for handover and the like. But absolutely, we have done it. BIM delivery is obviously there in the industry, and it's something we can offer.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. That was really insightful, seeing the solutions in action. So thank you. I'll run the last poll and then we will get into questions. So if everybody's happy to add their answers to the final poll, where will your business be investing in software solutions in the future? So there's a few answers here. You can probably multiple choice, but they are document management, CDE, golden thread, fire safety, health and safety, audits and inspections, safety case collation, and asset register. So that poll's live. I can see your answers coming in, predominantly around fire safety and then document management, CDE. But getting responses across all of these actually. So it looks like there are areas where investment is required or you are looking to invest in the future. So thank you for your answers, everyone. Just conscious of time, so we will wrap up. I just will close on a couple of slides. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just revisit what James said about best practice. When looking at kind of a unified digital solution, I think, it's always best to start small and grow with one solution. As an asset owner, we talked about specifying your handover so that you have that consistent standardized approach across your portfolio and then your information in one place. We are also here to help you get your existing buildings into the platform. And you heard that from Alistair of how we've been working with Student Roost and many other companies to get information in and understand what they have and what they need. And then once you've got all your information in across new and existing buildings, you have one platform to manage and everything from your property portfolio in there. So it becomes basically your house for everything. We also have those add-on solutions. James talked us through fire door audits, but we also have the add-ons for BSA compliance, so a dashboard so that you can manage that data effectively, and also gateway-free management as well. And last but not least, once you have everything in the in one platform, we can support with things like cladding remediation, building risk assessment, and as we talked about, fire door audits. So there's a lot that you can get out of one platform. Last but not least, what does ZooTech bring to the table? Obviously, that platform, it's flexible, configurable, and it aligns with your business. So we support you in bringing the right data in and aligning with what you need and your requirements. And as I said, you can start small and scale from the start. We have unrivaled service in terms of delivery and a customer support team. We want to be seen as an extension of your company and helping with scoping, definition of work, implementation, testing, training, all that sort of stuff we can help with. And then lastly, we have the knowledge. We have been doing this for 25 years. We've been working with customers across the residential sector in the asset space to get that building information into a place that works for them. We understand the market and we understand the regulatory piece. So we do have that expertise to get you to where you need to be. So on that note, I will take questions. I'll use the last few minutes to take some questions.
There's a question for me there, so thanks,
Yeah.
Dan. So the question is, does our platform generate the QR codes for the asset tags? Yeah, so and you're based near us, our Dublin office, awesome. So the answer to that is our platform doesn't generate the QR codes. No, the QR codes need to be kind of unique per door. There's obviously kind of mechanisms by which we do that. All we need is a QR code that effectively generates a door code, so the string that you saw previously. So there's a number of kind of ways to do that. I guess the short answer is we can provide you with QR codes. They're not generated by a platform, but they're simple enough to generate.
Thanks, James. Another question that's come in is, how can we keep documents up to date? E.g., if we're carrying out a refurb which generates new documents, is that easy to get them in the system, update them as we go?
So it's pretty simple, actually. So one of the key things and themes that I was banging relentlessly on about was this idea of consistency and standardization. So where particularly things like capital works or kind of further documentation is generated, the approach that most of our customers take is actually it goes back through to the same team that's responsible for working with the main contractors on the O&M manuals in the first place. So we provide almost a managed service for that. Which means that you can be confident that you can hand over a package of documents associated with, I think a refurb was mentioned, right? So it's a package of documents associated with that. And then because it's with, kind of experts in the platform in our services team, what they can do is ensure that everything's located in the right place. All of the various kind of meta tagging that enables search and etc. is done correctly. And then that is made accessible to you. You can do it yourself as well, of course, but the majority of our customers actually find value in being able to maintain that consistency through taking the managed service approach.
Thanks, James. And another question for you. Do we have experience in the commercial sector?
Yes, by commercial sector, I'm assuming kind of, yes, we do. So commercial buildings. A number of those. I'd say the majority, not the overwhelming majority, but the majority of work that we do is in housing. And then kind of beyond that, absolutely, it's kind of commercial. So we have quite a lot of retail projects, for example. We also have kind of a number of projects in the likes of education and public sector as well. So yes, there's a real kind of breadth of projects that we have worked with over time.
And then, Alistair, you touched on integration with things like PPM. Is it easy to give access to, say, suppliers or subcontractors if they need to get access to information? Maybe James, you can start, and Alistair, you can talk about your experience potentially.
I'll give the Zootech answer and then hope that it's corroborated by Alistair. I mean, look, our model is unlimited users, and that's kind of completely agnostic as to where those users are from. So in Student Roost's case, Alistair and the team effectively own user management, or kind of own whether or not people can be given access, but purely from a platform point of view. Like, our view is this exists because we want to make it easy for everybody who needs to get access to information to get that access. So yes, you can give it to anybody in effect.
Yeah, no, it has been very, very straightforward, and it's been very, very useful. Instead of people having to come to us or a team to sort of get information, they've been able to go straight to the system and utilize it that way. So been very, very straightforward and useful and easy to do.
Brilliant, thank you. Just conscious of time, so we will wrap up for today's session. I'd like to thank Alistair for joining us today and sharing his insight and what they've been doing at Student Roost. So thank you, Alistair, for being part of the session, and then also to you, James, for that insight around best practice for asset managers. Thank you to everybody that has participated. If there is any questions that you have following this session, please feel free to reach out to us and we can respond directly. Thank you for today, and I'd like to wrap up. Thank you, everybody.